From Curious Orbit, this is Ascend.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Ascend. This is your host, Brett Gillett. In this episode, I chat with Aaron Brooks from Softchoice. I hope you enjoy it. So, awesome, man. Thanks for taking the time to join me today. I appreciate it. I know we've had a couple attempts at this, so I'm excited to finally get to chat with you and see where this goes.
Me too.
As I said before, I literally have just a couple questions, and from there, we're just gonna kind of see where this goes. So if you see me looking away, I'm looking at my screen because I wanted to write a few notes before we got started. So let's just jump right in. So here's a pretty wide open question, but it kind of leads to a couple other things that I want to talk to you about. The term digital transformation has been around for a long time, but it seems like more and more, since we're in this interesting little time period, that everybody seems to be talking about it. So I guess where I'd like to start is kind of what does digital transformation mean to you?
So I love this question because I get asked it quite a bit, actually. And the way that I would frame, like, why is this coming up so much now more than ever? Like, it's always been a bit of a buzzword, but like, why are more customers talking about it? Our customers. And I'd say there's two things. One, obviously last year, the pandemic, everything like that. A lot of companies are going through this process of like, man, I gotta make it through. We're eventually going to go back to the way it was. So let me just hold tight and save enough money to make sure that my company can get through this and we can go back to the way it was. And the reality is that's not going to happen. Like, back to normal doesn't exist. And so I use this analogy of the Vikings, right? Like, the Vikings always burn their boats when they go and attack somewhere new. And it's like, there is no plan B. We're not going back. Like, we're either going forward or we're not going at all. And I think a lot of companies that I've spoken to are really in this place that, like, even us at our company, we are not going back to the way it was. So now you have to redefine what the future looks like. And so when you think about redefining success for an organization, it's like that can take so many different shapes. Once you understand what that success looks like, you typically then go, okay, well, how am I going to change to do things differently, to interact with my customers, to make money, to get back to profitability and growth? And then when you get that defined, you inevitably turn to technology to do it, especially now, because you've got the hybrid work model where people are remote. You got customers engaging you digitally now where they used to come physical, and there's all these changes. So I think digital transformation is coming up more often because it's real. Like, I literally have to digitally transform the way that I interact with my employees and with my customers. That's why it's coming up so often.
Okay. So do you think there is going back? Do you think some organizations will try to go back to the way it was before, or is this just kind of going to become the new normal? What do you think?
The customers that I've spoken to, and there's been quite a few of them, there are a few that have to go back. Like, if you're in manufacturing, there's going to be an element of needing to go back. So it all depends on the industry that you're in. I will say that I have not, even manufacturing, I've not met anybody that said that we're going back exactly the way it was. And there is going to be some element of a hybrid work model where they have learned a couple of things. One, especially around people. I had this really interesting conversation with a CIO who said, you know what, the most interesting thing for me when sending people home is that some of my high performers became low performers. And some of my low performers became high performers. And I said, well, why is that? How does that happen? And the realization for this individual was like, the more you understand the situation you can put somebody in to be successful, because everyone works differently and learns differently and behaves differently, you can get the most out of your people. So why would I ever go back to a place where I'm going to force somebody who has just become a high performer? Why would I bring them back into an area where they were a low performer? And so I think a lot of people are coming to this realization that the hybrid model works. Like, we've been wanting to do remote work forever. Like, it's not like that's a new concept. Companies just haven't taken the leap because they've been worried about productivity, and they've been worried about, are they going to lose the culture that exists within the organization? And I think this has proven that that's not the case. Yeah. That you can do it, and you can not just remain productive, but your people are happier, and you can use it as a retention strategy.
Yeah. So I want to make a comment on the Vikings analogy. I started watching Vikings because you mentioned it. I'm only about 5 episodes in right now. I'm trying not to like just binge watch it. So I'm trying to control my tendencies just to binge watch, but I hate to admit it, but I think you're right, man. It's a really good show. Really good show.
It is such a good show.
Yeah. I think there's like 7 seasons or something.
6.
Six? Okay.
Maybe there's 7. I don't even know, but it is so good.
Yeah.
Although I don't want to give it away.
Yeah.
I'm not going to talk plot, but I will say I feel like they were planning for an 8th season
Yeah.
and decided not to based on how it ended.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Just saying.
Okay. Well, I've got some watching to do. The other thing that you just mentioned, people are more productive from home, and or certain people are. Just sort of depends on how you like to work, right? Some people enjoy the routine of going to the office, working in that space, and then leaving at the end of the day. It's interesting you bring it up because I've been having a couple conversations just recently, talking to different customers and stuff, and they were almost everybody that I've talked to has said that they are struggling with trying to shut it off because work is at home. They're finding it increasingly challenging to not go and look at the laptop, or I could answer one more email. So you have any kind of tips, tricks, whatever you want to call them? I know it's different for everybody, but like, how are you dealing with that? What are you hearing from customers that you're talking to? What are they or how are they trying to approach it to help their employees not work all the time? Because I fall into that trap too. So I'm interested to kind of know how you handle it, how you hear other people are trying to handle it.
Yeah, the unfortunate part of this is it has to start at the top, right? Like if your boss's boss's boss is not setting a policy or figuring out a way in which they encourage a culture of disconnection, then it is going to happen, and it's going to be very unproductive. And I know there's been a lot of research done on this over the last year on just people being burnt out because they feel like there is no separation. So what we've done is actually put 3 no-fly zones a day in the calendar that you cannot have meetings. 9 to 10 a.m., 12:30 to 1:30. And so right now it's 12:30, so you can see I'm doing this on my personal time.
Thanks.
So you're welcome. 12:30 to 1:30. And then at 5:30 on, you're not allowed to send emails. You're not allowed to do videos. And so video chats, all that kind of stuff. So I think that's part of it. But the the leadership team has to adhere to that. They have to lead by example, because then it just sets this tension, right?
Yeah.
The other, for me personally, my biggest struggle is like, there's my door. Like I walk out here to there. I don't have that commute anymore. So I have no decompression time. So I go right from like 8 hours of really intense stuff to the family. And it's like, oh, gotta do this, gotta make that. There was no like drive home, listen to loud music, a little bit of road rage to get it out, and then you're home and everything's fine.
Yeah.
Sometimes you get home and there's somebody stuck a picture of somebody you hate on the back of their Jeep. I don't know who that would be.
I have no idea.
Yeah, exactly. But that's gone, right? And so you have to be purposeful and like find time for yourself. So I've talked to my family about this, and I'll leave my office and people will leave me alone. I'll go for a walk, or I'll go sit in a garage and have a beer and listen to some music or whatever.
Yeah.
You need that downtime, because it's not even just ending work. It's also like the break from the family routine.
Yeah. No, it's a really good idea. Like, I try to do the same thing. I am finding that I'm exercising more actually now than I did in the past. And I think maybe subconsciously I'm doing that because maybe for the same reason, right? I'm lucky enough to have like a dedicated space here, and it's my office. So same to you, right? I didn't have the same type of commute that you did, but still you've got that moment in time where you're by yourself in the car. So I think maybe I'm doing the same thing. I kind of leave here and I go right into the basement and I go exercise for 30 minutes, 45 minutes, whatever I feel like that day, and put my headphones on and think about something else. So having that kind of strategy, I think, is really important.
It's really another side effect to all this. We talk about the future of work all the time. Like, you hear that comment about like, mobile workforce, hybrid workforce, whatever. I had another individual I spoke to, and he said, for them, it's the future of operations. Like, if you think about traditional IT and how they're managing today, when you came to work for us, you got a laptop and you go met IT and you got all your stuff, you got training. Well, now if you think about companies that everyone's at home, when they go and onboard an employee, they've got to go and order everything and have it direct shipped to the house.
Yeah.
And now how do you provision that device? How do you do asset management? How do you ensure that they're adopting and understanding how to use the technology effectively? And so the entire way that you operationalize your IT environment becomes more challenging. And so you see a lot of customers talking about cloud-based technologies or automation for onboarding and offboarding employees, and how do you make sure they have the right applications. And so I think there's a real opportunity for the automation space in this new hybrid work reality, which is new for IT. They're not used to doing that.
Yeah, it's actually, it's timely that you said that, because we just went through that ourselves, brought somebody new in, and before we would get together as a team, right, in a co-working space, being remote by design. The team would get together, do a day-long orientation, go for lunch, kind of do a little bit of team building, try to make that new person feel as quickly as they can part of the team. You can't do that now. And it was kind of like, I'm sitting here going, well, how do we get the laptop over to this person? How do we get, we usually give them a couple extra things when they join. Like, how do we get that all over to this person? You don't even, I can speak for myself, and, we're not dealing with scale here, but you don't even think about it. You're just like, you have that, oh shit moment. Like, wait, this totally breaks the process that used to work pretty well. Everybody just got together and you said, here's your stuff. Let's get it all set up. So it's interesting. I hadn't thought of it before. Do you see, I know BYOD has been a thing for a while. Some people I think have adopted it, others have not. Do you think BYOD will come back at this point, where organizations will say, hey, listen, we're going to give you some sort of secure tool, like a virtual desktop or something like that. We don't really care what you use, as long as you have a reasonable device that can load this client. Do you think that's going to be the way it goes, or will larger organizations continue to, like to your comment, drop ship things, get that gear into those people's hands? What do you think will happen there?
I think we're already seeing a lot of change in that space. Virtual desktop is absolutely being talked about a lot. I don't know how quickly it'll go. Like, I always find we flirt with this conversation quite a bit over the last 5-6 years or whatever. And there just becomes a part of like, I don't know if it's worth it. I don't know how to support the devices. If they have a help desk issue, now there's 40,000 different types of devices. I can't do it. So I think some organizations are starting to talk about choose your own device instead of bring your own device.
Okay.
So they will, based on your role, maybe give you an access to a portal in which you can decide the types of things that you want to use based on your home environment. So, I just onboarded an employee recently who didn't like the earbuds that we sent them. Okay. They hurt their ears.
Okay.
And it's like, okay, well, go buy your own and expense it. But what we should have done, and we've started talking about now, is, well, everybody is, even just from an accessibility standpoint, they have different physical needs. And so we should be allowing them to decide on the types of devices. We have a standard deployment now of 2 monitors. Well, some people don't want 2. They just want one big one that curves.
Yeah.
So why would we not give them that option? It doesn't cost anymore.
Yeah.
But instead of just saying bring your own device, we just open up our standards a little bit more based on how you'd like to work. So I think I'm seeing that a lot. And then there's another thing that's popping up quite often is the whole client as a service, right? So let's do the choose your own device piece, but the companies don't want to fully outright buy it. So they're just moving to that leasing model where it includes virtual desktop plus the client device, and it's just a monthly fee for those users. Especially companies that are still unsure in the pandemic if their force is going to scale up and down. Like, they may need to lay people off, they may need to quickly hire, and they don't want to make those big capital expenditures anymore. So we're actually seeing a lot of companies re-look at their capex to opex models, and then client as a service is becoming more of a conversation.
Yeah, that's interesting. I guess you don't want to end up with a bunch of gear if you do have to really quickly change the size of the workforce. Now, what do you do with just as an example, all those monitors, right? You don't want to you end up having a warehouse full of gear maybe for the next wave of people that come in. Yeah, it's interesting. Let's change gears a little bit and talk about public cloud. Still from the strategy perspective, what I'm interested to kind of get your take on is sort of technology strategy or IT strategy has been around forever. We're constantly talking about it and kind of reinventing it. So what I'd like to know is kind of, what are you hearing and what are you guys talking about internally around how has public cloud changed organizations' approach to technology?
It's a great question. So there's a number of things happening that really center around the concept of agility, right? So when you think about everything that happened last year, and all of a sudden all my employees are home, and now half the way that I architected my applications, whether it was on-prem or in the cloud, was meant for a workforce that was in an area. And now that those users are gone into different areas, the traffic flow changes, and so the way that I serve up that application needs to change. And so we saw a real quick shift of people moving applications to the public cloud. Just need to get it there for availability and reliability reasons, because if it was on-prem, you now had a bottleneck because everyone that was supposed to be in the office is accessing it remotely. So you had that shift. And then they started realizing, man, there's a lot of benefit to the agility found in having my applications in the cloud. And so they started to take the time, because of the pandemic, to figure out cheaper ways to have those applications serviced in the cloud, because obviously moving to the consumption model or the OpEx model, how it's architected is so important. And how I manage that environment is so important, not just from keeping the applications healthy, but from controlling costs. And because of the pandemic, you wanted to save as much money as possible to make it through. And I think there was a lot of lessons learned there. Now companies are like, same thing with the Vikings, like, oh, I'm not going back. Like if I'm going to be in a hybrid model, I want to really fully embrace this cloud environment. And I like the agility it's afforded me. So you see people not just talk about leveraging the technology differently, but moving to more agile frameworks of how they, sorry, I'm going to call here, how they manage their IT environments and how they do deployments of applications, and getting away from those long cycles of like, what's my 1 to 5 year budget? Let's move to an agile model and start thinking about chargebacks and showbacks to the organizations that are actually spending the money on those cloud applications. So for me, it's all about the agility. And so to me, it falls into 3 areas. They're looking to extend to cloud, which they started last year. So how do I take what I have today and extend my applications into the cloud? Second is, how do I create a secure and resilient infrastructure, i.e., how do I manage this ongoing now because it's challenging? And the last one is really around automation of everything. A lot of companies don't have their IT teams coming back into the office. And now that everything's moving to cloud, it's the whole future of operations. It applies to public cloud as well. How do I change the way that I operationalize and automate my infrastructure and applications?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think this kind of goes back to what we were talking about, the idea of digital transformation, because this idea of agility isn't new to public cloud, but I think it was something that people talked about in the past. Like, oh, we want to be able to be more agile, whatever that means, right? Yeah, scaling up, scaling down, depending on what you're doing. But I think now we're actually seeing people really consider that for real, let's say. Okay. And a great example of that, you made me think of this, was we were talking about remote workforces. And we had a customer that had, when the pandemic first started back in March, they said, okay, we've got a week to get 500 people out of offices working from home. And the thing that they didn't think about, they did a fantastic job doing this, but the one thing that they didn't consider was the physical devices that were left behind that everybody would normally connect to, like traditional VPN. And they ran into a couple things. They couldn't scale because they had architected those for roughly 20% of the workforce, because most people would end up in the office every day. And then they didn't have the licensing in place. So when you think about the agility of public cloud, licensing, depending on the service, is included. So if you need 10 licenses today, you're good. If you need 1,000 tomorrow, you're good. That's right. And depending again on the service that you're using, it could support 10 users or 1,000. And anywhere in between. And if you're picking kind of managed services, it'll do that scale for you. So I thought that was really interesting that you kind of mentioned that. Are there any other things that kind of jumped out at you? You mentioned about, actually, let's go back to hybrid. Here's another thing that I think means a lot of different people, a lot of different things to different people. When you think about hybrid, what does that mean? Or what are your customers meaning when they say hybrid cloud now?
It really depends on who you ask. Like if you ask the IT individual, they look at it as my public and private environments or on-premise environments can work together in an integrated fashion, and I can turn on and off services to deploy applications regardless of where it is. So, somebody that I work with always says cloud's an architecture, not a destination. And so I think that from an IT standpoint, that's hybrid. Then you have some customers I talk to that are more on the application down perspective, like they don't care about the infrastructure. And your hybrid environment could be a hybrid cloud application, right? Where you have code running in AWS, facilitating that front end customer experience. My data might be in Google because I like the compute, the analytic engine that's in Google. And then I have some of my fourth tier storage in my storage environments on-prem because of compliance reasons. And so the application itself is in a hybrid environment. So those are the two types of scenarios that we see from a hybrid perspective.
Okay.
But I'll be honest, like there's very few customers that I've seen that have really invested in private cloud.
Yeah.
Like they've started to become more agile. And I see a lot of customers that have VMware investments in their environment. Now that VMware can extend into AWS, Azure, and GCP, commercial off the shelf software that you're not going to modernize, you're not going to start recoding. You do want to make sure that they're agile. And so we are starting to see that extension. That's that whole extended cloud where you're leveraging the investments you've made. It might not be 100% ideal for 10 years from now, but for right now, I need that flexibility and portability to be able to move them and treat those infrastructures as one. So we're actually seeing quite a bit of customers move in that direction.
Are you seeing any, this is an interesting concept again for me because hybrid I think has changed over time. Hybrid used to mean public and private, right? And then I think a lot of people started thinking about hybrid as maybe public and public, provider one and provider two. And the problem or the challenge that I often find people run into with let's call hybrid public is that you've taken something from a traditional environment, now jammed it onto whatever that provider is, doesn't matter which, and you're asking people to make a lot of changes in the way they operate and the way they think about things. To go back to that concept of agility, we have to think about how do we scale these environments. It's different, right? It's familiar but different. And then public now means I'm going to ask you to make even more changes, right? Let's do the AWS and Azure thing. We're going to run something on AWS, but I'm also going to ask you to run maybe some other component on Azure of that. Those are challenging architectures to build because now I'm asking you to basically manage two providers. So what we're starting to see, and I think it's really early, and I'd love to know if you're seeing this at all, is hybrid within a single provider. So meaning that environment runs in, I'll use AWS as the example, US East 1, and it also runs in US West 2. And that's what they're considering hybrid because now you've got a multi-region deployment on a single provider. So you remove some of the complexity of having to know both platforms, but you've still got the ability to fail over if you needed to or whatever. Are you seeing anybody do that type of hybrid deployment yet?
They are, but they don't call it hybrid. Like that to me is like high availability or business continuity or disaster recovery. Like you see, when that language is used, you do see it being architected in that way.
Okay.
Most that we speak to is more the latter of what I talked about around hybrid. The other part to hybrid is purpose built. Like so, you might not have an application that uses multiple clouds. But you could find a reason to say, hey, we've really invested in Microsoft Teams and we're going to turn Teams into a platform. And that means that there's got to be integration into some automation around, the hybrid work model that I talked about, where we're going to onboard and offboard users differently. Well, I wouldn't build that automation engine for the business process side of that for Teams in any other cloud but Azure. However, I may still have most of my applications in AWS because it's a very developer-friendly environment and it's cloud native. So you are seeing purpose-built type hybrid concepts showing up, or you see different departments have different needs. And so they're picking their cloud provider based on the types of outcomes that they need to drive and getting it closest to that ecosystem of how I'm building that application then drives the need for hybrid.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Let's go back to the term agility again. And I guess kind of ask a question around, I know we've talked a lot about digital transformation. Organizations of all sizes have been kind of forced to go down this path because of the situation that we all find ourselves in. But if you ran into an organization that just was maybe in a unique position and digital transformation kind of hadn't still been a really important topic for them, and they were asking you about this idea of agility and how to build, a more agile technology solution, and they're just getting started, kind of what would be a couple things that you would recommend to them or suggest that they start with? Like, are there some processes they should look at? Are there common technologies that you're seeing that people are implementing in their environments to help them be more agile? Can you give us an idea of kind of what that first couple steps into being more agile might look like for an organization?
The most common that we see that are unfamiliar, so forget the digital transformation stuff, and just really thinking about agility in IT, the most common conversations around governance for us, right? So, what is it? How is it you want it to run, and what does good look like for you, and what are you dealing with from a resource constraint perspective? And then how do I leverage the automation facilities within the cloud environments to set policies and to govern my environment better, whether it's security policies, cost policies, just business related things that you're expecting to see in your environment, and how do I flag them so that I can adjust and react differently? That allows that kind of agility because you're not fighting as many fires. So that's probably the most common for us, is actually just simple standard governance.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, because I think it's governance in a lot of cases is probably very similar to disaster recovery strategies. You might have thought about it, but you put it in that binder and everybody has a copy of it that's never been touched. And now you might find yourself, because of the situation we're in, having to test that for real. Governance kind of feels very similar to that. You might have it well documented, but does it actually, number one, ever get looked at? And number two, now that we're in a unique situation, does it really still apply? So I can see that making a lot of sense for people to actually go back and reevaluate.
And the second part to that is some sort of DevOps methodology, right? Like, we are seeing how do we think differently about our IT projects and do them in a more Scrum-based, scalable, agile type of fashion to fail fast, fail forward, fail often, that whole mentality, and start to explore some of the simple platform services to start decoupling the application from the infrastructure. Allows for that agility. Containers is another one that people explore where they're not really sure where it fits into their IT strategy. But a lot of it's learning, man. Learning and development is so important right now, with just understanding the art of the possible and exploring yourself to what others are doing, like getting involved in user groups and communities and just seeing what other people are doing. I still use the story of your video camera on the front of your house. And the AI you built into that to say, oh, look, you got smarter and smarter over time and started sending notifications. And as funny as that is, like that use context, how much did you learn about that entire environment? And I feel like a lot of customers, IT teams, need to be afforded the time to do those kind of innovative things, because you're not going to get agility if you don't understand the art of the possible.
Yeah, I think it's a couple things. First off, I'm smiling as you tell the story, because every time I think about that story, I still remember the call to my service provider when I got like a absolutely enormous internet bill, because I didn't even think about what would it actually cost me to send 100,000 images over my ISP up to an S3 bucket in AWS. Didn't cost me anything in AWS, but my ISP had a windfall. They must have wondered what the hell was going on. So that was an interesting conversation, both inside the house and the conversation that happened with the service provider. So good times all around. But you're right. I think that's one of the things that we often talk about, is that all of these platforms, doesn't matter which one, they're massive, they change rapidly, and really the only way that you can understand how to use them, maybe how to actually take that, what you've learned, and apply it to something real within the organization, is to build. And I think AWS kind of hits it on the head when they say, I think the slogan is something like "We are builders" or something like that. Like, really, to learn these platforms, doesn't matter if it's AWS or another one, you have to get in there on a regular basis and build, right? We talk about that silly example all the time still, and that was, oh man, that was a long time ago, right?
That was back when this was shorter than this.
So, exactly. I've done an exchange. So one more question, and then I'm going to hit you with a couple rapid fire questions, because I was thinking about this conversation today, and I want to ask you a few really quick things. So another definition for me, because we've talked about digital transformation, we've talked about agility, and you mentioned the term DevOps. And DevOps, again, is one of those things that, you know, I've heard somebody say along the way, like, if you ask 10 people what DevOps means, you'll get 12 different answers, because it means different things to different people. So when you talk about DevOps, when you think about DevOps, what is DevOps to you? Right? What's it actually mean?
Yeah. So there's I'll answer that in two ways. One, I had somebody really, really smart tell me once that DevOps is simply the automation of everything. And I'm not going to say who that was. I don't know why you look so confused, because it was you that told me this. And so I totally believe that. And part of that is just, it's a methodology. It's an approach to something. It's not a series of tools and like people and that kind of stuff. Like it really is more cultural. And we're going to approach the solutioning of problems with technology in a different fashion. Yeah. That's, to me, at the core of DevOps. Yeah. Is bringing those worlds together and being more creative around how we solve them.
Yeah. So that's funny. We totally see it. It's not a technology question. It's people, it's processes, and often when we go into organizations that have a DevOps practice, what it is a whole massive collections of tools that probably don't work well together, or you're spending a lot of time trying to glue those services together, those different tools together, and you're missing the entire, I think, point of it. You could probably just turn most of that stuff off and not even miss it. But you're thinking about technology when it's really a cultural thing. It's how are we going to approach operations within this environment, right? And that really comes down to automation and I think removing people from the equation. That doesn't mean people lose their jobs. That means people go off and do higher value things, because that's what a computer's good at doing, right? Is doing things repetitively.
It's totally true. And what you just reminded me of something. We had a customer and they came in and we were doing this is back when we could actually see human beings face to face.
Yeah. I know that drives you crazy.
Like as an extrovert, it's killing me. I go to Starbucks they're my only friends. Like I make friends with all the people at Starbucks and Longos because like I don't know who else to talk to. So anyway, they were in, and the DevOps guy was there, and he was talking about DevOps, and he said, you know what, man, we have 26 developer teams in our company. He goes, we're the only ones we're like the centralized DevOps team, and we're supposed to influence and change the way that these application teams develop their applications. Nobody's listening. Everyone's got their little sandcastle of tools they like, processes they like, and nobody wants to use this, even though it's more efficient. And so it is a people thing. It's a total cultural mind blast of change that is going to require change management. And you're going to have to think about, how do I incent them to want to change? How do I show them that this is better and make it good for them, blah, blah, blah. Like we saw it back in the voice over IP days. From then to now, like it's the same thing. So it is a cultural thing.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it goes that comment goes right back to where I got started. Being in the systems management space, we would often run into 47 different monitoring tools, and they all just did one thing. And then somebody would say, but how do I get a picture of everything? And then you would spend a year and a half trying to get 47 different tools talking to each other or dumping data into, oh man. I shouldn't really complain because that's how I built my entire career. But when I look back at it, I'm like, man, we were crazy. And I think we still really are crazy a lot of times. It's acquisition of tooling more than people and process, I think, a lot of times.
Totally.
Yeah. All right, man. So quick fire here to end. All right. Best D&D character class.
Oh, wizard. Like
what? Really?
Dude, yeah. Like it's not even.
Oh man, when I was thinking of these, I thought for sure you were saying ranger.
I knew you were going to say that because of the team we built.
Yeah.
But yes, in reality, if I was to become a D&D person, I would be a ranger, only because of who I am.
Okay.
Who I want to be, I'd want to be a wizard. I'm just not smart enough.
Okay. So you're not smart enough. So flip it around. Worst character class.
Bard.
There we go. I knew that one for sure.
What is a bard? Who made that up? And who chooses that character?
What does a bard actually do?
Like it's like musical magic. Like, I don't even understand that. Like,
that just
I love
seems
music,
weird.
But like, give me a break.
Yeah, it seems weird. Okay, best Batman?
There is none.
There is
If
none.
I had to pick one,
Yeah, you got to pick one.
Dark Knight Returns.
Dark Knight Returns. Okay, so let's reframe the question. Best actor who has played the Batman character?
Christian Bale.
Christian Bale. I know the answer to this one, and it goes back to what you said already, but I'm still going to make you say it. Worst actor to ever play Batman?
I can't even say his name. Like, it's the man whose name I cannot repeat. He also killed Daredevil.
We'll leave it there. I'm gonna go out on a limb on this one. I'm knowing you. I'm pretty confident to ask you this. What is the book that you are either reading right now, or that have read recently, that you think it doesn't have, it can be fiction, nonfiction? Yeah, I think that's the way you say it. Oof, wow. Need more coffee. That you think everybody should read?
Wow. I'm going to say Dare to Lead.
Dare to Lead. Okay. I'll add it to my list.
Brene Brown. It's the first leadership book I've ever read that I read more than once. Like back to back, like before I read another book. Yeah. I really, sorry, I know this is a quick answer thing, but like being an empathetic leader is so important right now in our world. And it's just such a great book that it's okay to be vulnerable and still be powerful. So it's a fantastic book.
Yeah, okay, good suggestion. And then final question, just because in your background there, favorite comic book series?
Daredevil.
Yeah. Why?
Just because it's such a character struggle. Like it's dark and it's the closest to reality, and it hits on so many social and religious just problems and challenges. It's just real, and the character is so flawed that he struggles with himself more than he struggles with the villains. So it's a really deep character.
Yeah, very good. And you know what? I just thought of one other thing because you mentioned Vikings at the beginning. What's the TV series you're watching right now?
Oh, what's it called? Snowpiercer.
Are you really watching Snowpiercer?
I know.
Is it worth it? Because the movie, to be honest, sucked.
Well, the movie was, the series is actually really good.
Okay.
David, I can't remember his last name. He's also a rapper. He's the main character in it. He's fantastic.
Yeah.
And it's a really good show. And we just finished Longmire.
Yeah.
Yellow.
Oh, Yellowstone. Yeah. Oh, good so one. Good. Did you watch Longmire too?
No.
You if you like Yellowstone, you got to watch Longmire.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah. I started walking around in a cowboy hat and stuff after. I'm kidding. I didn't do that. That'd be really weird. But I wanted to from watching that show. What a great show. Great show.
Yeah. Okay. I'll take a look at it.
Awesome. Well, man, I want to say thanks. This has been a lot of fun. We're going to do it again because I think you and I could have all sorts of different topics come up here and just have a conversation about all sorts of things. So thanks very much. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Stay safe and, I guess go hang out at the Starbucks safely and meet all your friends.
Mask on, man.
Mask on. It's hard to drink coffee through a mask though.
Just put a straw.
Tastes kind of weird.
That's right. It's a filter.
Yeah, it's a filter. Extra layer of filtering. Awesome, man. Thanks very much.
No problem, brother.